The JavaScript math object allows you to do complex mathematical operations without the need for a bunch of excess code. So in today's video, we're going to take a look at the math object, how it works, and some of the properties and methods that we have available on it. So what exactly is the JavaScript math object? Well, the math object is an object that contains properties and methods that help you to more easily do complex mathematical operations. And we can see this math object just by logging it out. So we can say console.log, and then we can say math. And this is very important here. The M has to be capitalized, or else it's not going to work. So if we save this, we can actually see the math object appear over in our console. And if we expand it, we can see all these different properties here at the top, and then we can see all these different methods down here at the bottom. And we're going to explore quite a few of these different properties and methods here today. So the first property that we're going to take a look at is the pi property. So to access it, all we have to do is say Math.pow. And it's very important, again, that we have pi capitalized, or else this isn't going to work. And if we save this, we can see in the console that we get 3.14 blah, 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 blah. This is the first however many digits of pi. And this is a very good starting point. If we're ever in the need to calculate the circumference of a circle, or anything like that in any of our web applications. Now, the next method that we're going to take a look at is everyone's favorite method, the random method. And what this method does is it creates a pseudo-random number between 0 and 1. And this may seem a little bit useless now, but if we just add a little bit of extra math to it, it can create real random numbers. And we'll take a look at how to do that here in a little bit. But for now, let's take a look at the random method. All we have to do is say math.random, and we call it just like that. And if we save that, it's going to give us a random number, a pseudo-random number. And if we keep saving, every time that we save and refresh, it's going to give us a new random number. Now on to the next few methods, which are going to be rounding methods. And these methods allow you to round up or round down, or whichever way you want to round. So let's take a look at the first method, the Math.floor method. Now the Math.floor method is always a method that is going to round down to the nearest integer or whole number. So to access the floor method, all we have to say is Math.floor, and we call it just like this. And it expects us to pass in a number. Now this number can be anywhere from a whole number to a decimal number. It really doesn't matter. It's going to just round it to the nearest whole number. So we can pass in 52.3634558, whatever. And if we save that, it's going to output 52, which is the nearest whole number. Now, it's always going to round down, so it doesn't really matter what our decimal is. It could be 999, infinitely repeating, whatever, and it's still going to give us 52. Now, the opposite of this is actually going to be Math.ceil. And what this does is it's always going to round up. So this can be any number whatsoever, and this is the exact opposite of the floor method, where it's going to round up to the next whole number. So it could be a 00001, and it's still going to round up to 53. Now, if you want real mathematical rounding, you're actually going to use the Math.round method, just like this. And what it's going to do is it's going to determine whether or not it should round up or whether or not it should round down. And in this case, the number actually does matter. So if it's above half, it's going to round up just like in regular math. And if it's below half, it's going to round down. So we can have 52.145 whatever, and it's going to round down to 52. But if we have 52.99 whatever, it's going to round up to 53. And you can even have 5555, and it's actually going to round up to 53 because the math.round is going to round 5 and above up to the next rounding number. Now the next two that we're going to take a look at are the min and max, and these take in a comma separated list and returns to you the minimum or the maximum, whichever one you want. So let's start with the min, and we can pass in any number of numbers. So we can pass in 100 or 1,000, whatever. I'm just going to pass in a few here. So we can say 25, 15, 4, 89, 63, and 69. And if we save that, we are actually going to get 4 as the min, because 4 is the smallest number that we passed in there. And if we pass in a negative 15, it's going to give us that negative 15 back, because negative 15 is the smallest number in that list. And we can do the exact same thing for max, and it's going to give us the biggest number in that list. It's just an easy way of checking to see which one in a list is the biggest or smallest numbers. Now, the next method that we're going to take a look at is the Math.pow method. And what this does is it raises one number to another, and it's essentially just an exponent. So we're going to use the Math.pow method, and the first number that it expects is the base, or the regular number. So we're going to pass in a 3 here, and then we're going to comma separate it, and the second number is going to be the exponent, what we want to raise it to. So we can say 3 to the third power, and it's going to give us the answer of 27. We can pass in just about any numbers in here as well. We could pass in an 8 and a 4, and this is going to raise 4 to the 8th power, and it's apparently this number. And the next method is going to be essentially the exact opposite, being the square root method. So again, we can access this on the math object by saying math.sqrt, and we just need to pass in a number for it to square root. So 36, the square root of 36 is going to be 6, or the square root of 100 is going to be 10, and so on and so forth. This is how you get the square root in JavaScript. We also have a method available to get the cube root of something. Now, a cube is any number that is raised to the power of 3. So to get the cube root, we're going to use math.cuberoot, and we're going to pass in our cubed number. So we can say 64, and the cube root of 64 is 4, because 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. And we can say 125, the cube root of 125 is actually 5, because 5 times 5 times 5 is 125. Now, the last method that we're going to take a look at today is actually going to be the truncate method. And all this does is it just chops off the decimal. So it doesn't matter what the number is, it's just going to chop off the decimal. So we can use the trunc method, and we can pass in any number. It can be a whole number, and it'll work perfectly fine. We can pass in a decimal number, and all it's going to do is just going to chop off that decimal portion of the number, and that's it. So now let's take a look to see how we can combine multiple of these things together. And to more easily see this, I'm going to save the result in the variable num. Now, essentially, the way that these things work is it's going to evaluate from the inside out, and I'll show you what I mean. So let's say we want to raise something to the power of something. So we're going to use the Math.pow, and let's say we want to raise 3 to the power of something else. So let's say this something else is going to be the square root of another number. So let's say math.sqrt, and we're going to pass in the number, let's say 36. Now, whenever this evaluates, this is going to evaluate first, and then it's going to get to this portion where it sees this other method, and it's going to need the result of that method before it can finish the result of the Math.pow method. So essentially, this is going to run first, get the result of this, and then this is going to finish running. So if we console.log this, our num variable, we're going to get the result of 729. So this is going to evaluate to 6, and then it's going to raise 3 to the power of 6, which gives us the result of 729. Now let's take a look at what everyone has been waiting for, the random number generator. Now, the way that we're going to do this is we're going to create a random integer between a specific set of ranges. So let's create our range first. So we're going to say our maximum is going to be equal to, let's say, 200, and we'll say our min is going to be equal to 10, and then we're going to save our result in a num variable. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to floor it. So we're going to say math.floor, and the reason that we have to floor this is because if you remember, the math.random is going to create a random number between 0 and 1. So whenever we create that random number, we need to floor it. So the next thing we need to do is create our random number. So we're going to say math.random. And then we need to multiply that random number by the min, or the max, minus the min. And then we're also going to add the min. And the way this is going to work is that it's going to evaluate this first. Then it's going to generate our random number between 0 and 1. And then we're going to first subtract the max minus the min. And then it's going to multiply our random number times that result. And then our min is going to be added to that result. So whenever all said and done, we can console.log num. And if we inspect, we should get a random number in any range between 200 and 10. And if we keep saving, we keep getting random numbers between 10 and 200. And that is a wrap for the JavaScript math object. Now, I'll leave a list of all of these methods and more that we didn't take a look at down in the description below if you want to go and check it out. In the meantime, if you did like the video, make sure you slap a like on it. Check out the full playlist, link is right next to me. Make sure you subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.